Hello again, spiritual rebels. I want to pick up where I left off last time. We were discussing how you channel and some important things to remember about channeling. The best channelers are those who are centered in themselves, who have a very strong sense of who and what they are, who are happy with who and what they are, and are very guarded about their own nature, their own way of being. That way, if another energy comes and works through them and speaks through them, acts through them, talks to them, the impact will not be harmful or as harmful as it would be otherwise. Now, channeling is idiosyncratic. You can't generalize about exactly what's going to happen when a person has a symbiotic, an interface with another being in that way. It has a lot to do, that the effect will have a lot to do with both the human making the connection and the nature of the entity that they're connecting to. It can be very destructive. It can be very helpful and healing. It can make the human more, or it can destroy the human entirely. It's important that the arrangement between the human and that which the human is interfacing with in that way is worked out before the interface takes place. And it's very important that the human can identify the positive energy emanation of another being from the negative. Now, that's not something, that identification ability, it doesn't come from the head, it doesn't come from the brain. It isn't something you can think your way out of or figure out with logic. It comes from the heart. It comes from your empathy, your ability to identify a vibration on a spiritual level emotionally. Emotion tends to be far more honest. It's very difficult to fabricate the emotions. You can trigger emotions. You can set a human up so that they will have a very specific emotional reaction that's not in keeping with what's happening to them. But on a pure, raw, unadulterated level, most often, if we're not interfered with, our instinctive emotional reaction to something, our first reaction to something, will tell you the true nature of what you're dealing with. So it's important before you create an interface with another entity that you identify its true nature. And that's something I think that gets left out of. It's like when the ignorant play with a Ouija board. That is can be a very dangerous interface if it's simply done without any protections or any protocols. I know that's something that the spiritualists set up, but the spiritualists had their directives. They had their very specific ways of approaching things, and they were trained in them. They learned how, through their guides and guardians, how to interface safely with the other side. And children, adolescents, fooling around with that kind of tool has created a lot of problems. So you really have to be careful with the method and mode of interacting with the spirit world, because it can get you into trouble. And I think a lot of the reasons why people don't realize it in our society is because a lot of people don't believe that spirit is real and that it can have an effect on us, on our world, a physical effect on us and our world. And that's going to be changing because our world is changing. It's becoming less dense. So those energies, we're going to see a lot more physical manifestation, physical reaction from our spiritual energies. And channeling, it's not necessarily dangerous if done correctly. It's not always done correctly. If you're a child, if you're undeveloped or underdeveloped, if you're not fully adult, if you're not fully responsible for yourself, if you have emotional or mental issues, channeling is something that is extraordinarily dangerous, and I would not recommend it. There are people who make their living as channels. What I have noticed about the channeling world is you have more or less 5 years of a healthy connection where you can interface with another entity and work together before it becomes a bit too much. What I've noticed is channelers would, most of them, many of them, would burn themselves out after 5 years unless they knew how to extend the life of the relationship. There are ways to do that. Most channelers did not know those methods, did not practice those methods, and they had a good 5 years before they had to stop. I think that professional channeling, holding that space for the purpose of answering questions, uh, pulling information, getting information, uh, where you are the face of the entity, where the being is coming through you and talking through you directly in that way. I think it's difficult for the human holding that space because most of those who do that, they are selling tickets. They are deciding that a particular time in a particular place that they're going to perform that function. And celestial energies shift and change. Season energies shift and change. We shift and change. It's very difficult to promise and deliver that a spiritual energy is going to manifest at exactly that time, in exactly that place. You can attune yourself to it. It doesn't mean it's going to happen each time. And those who were charging a great deal of money to provide that service, it's taxing on the human, but it's also running a big risk. What happens when you are available for that and you're open for that and it doesn't come through? It's it's a temptation to pretend that you are supplying that when you really aren't. So I think that it's it's much easier to dialogue with spirit than to carry one. Channeling is carrying that spirit. So I hope that was enlightening. I think next time I will share a few stories about the good and the bad of what I have seen, what I have experienced with that method of spiritual interface. But we're in wintertime, so I'm keeping this short as we are in the forest. And welcome to the forest. Stay warm.